town divided. Wellington, with a population of only 6,000, supports 2 newspapers, and some say that's one too many. This report from Kerry Oldfield.
Good morning, this is the ABC, and it's a great day in the Central West.
Me and my wife went all over town, and everywhere that went, the people turned us down, Lord, in the bushwalk.
Wellington, a wool and wheat town on the Mitchell Highway, 360 kilometres northwest of Sydney. It's the sort of town most city people would drive straight through. It's pretty, it's quiet, but there's nothing to set it apart from 100 other country centres. That is, until you read a copy of the Wellington Voice. And you could be forgiven for thinking you're in Dodge City, Harlem or Chicago in the 1920s. In just 12 months, the Voice's editor, Jim BRUNKER, claims he's exposed crooks, crime and given even Little Wellington a new sense of direction. But it's his paper's shoot-from-the-hip style of reporting that's upset, even outraged, the Shire President and nearly all the townspeople, many of whom are Aborigines.
Well, you read in their box
if you had an education, you'd be able to read English and you would understand what was written, but I'm afraid you haven't, and this is the whole point. You jump off half-cocked.
I read the paper over and over.
If you cared for the young children, Aboriginal children of this town, you would make sure that they are home of an evening and not running around this town at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning.
How about the Aboriginal people's name is in your papers, not what you write in it?
So you believe that apparently that the people of Wellington are a bunch of sadomasochists who love reading about Aboriginals. Exactly. You know, they've had a gutful of Aboriginal people in this town who are intent upon breaking the law, who are intent upon smashing 98% of our shop windows.
The same thing. Do you know about those?
These are the premises of the Wellington Voice. Although there's no sign on the door, the awning says Baby Boutique, and there's no phone inside. Not your typical newsroom, but then this isn't your typical country newspaper. A lot of people love it, but the Australia Press Council calls it a disgraceful publication. And some prominent townsfolk say it's cultivating fear and racism in a town where 1/5 of the population is black.
Well, I think he's creating a deep rift, and I think he's trying to do it, I don't know what his aim is, but I think he's trying to do it between the Aboriginal and the white community.
Do you think he doesn't realise what effect he's having on the community?
If he had some understanding of some of the other issues that he was generating, fear, insecurity, shame, racialism, then what he thinks is the good that he's doing would be, I think, far outweighed by what I believe is gross harm.
Was it all right or not? Was it all right or not?
Oh, I wasn't too bad.
Thank you. Good. Show.
Twice a day, 49-year-old Jim BRUNKER walks the streets of Wellington, gathering news. Some would say scandal.
Good. There we go. Not too bad. Any news for me today? Gossip, scandal, murder, mayhem, anything at all?
No.
And his belief that controversy sells newspapers has earned him the reputation of Australia's most outrageous newspaper editor. A former disc jockey and TV commentator, BRUNKER came to Wellington 3 years ago, after 20 years' experience on a number of country newspapers. BRUNKER won't say who owns the Wellington Voice, but in just 12 months, he says it's paying its way and outselling its local competitor, the Wellington Times. What do you think of the Wellington Times?
Trash journalism.
What do you think of Mr. BRUNKER's style of writing?
I ignore him.
What, you don't even acknowledge the existence of the Wellington Voice?
As far as I'm concerned, it does not exist.
Uptownings are causing most of the problem in Wellington, said Mr. Bill Riley.
And it's these members of the local Aboriginal cooperative who have borne the brunt of the Voice's witch hunting. The co-op's method of funding and its directors are constantly vilified. Take Neville Brown. He's the co-op secretary, and he's been called everything from an uptown nigger to vermin, all in the columns of the Wellington Voice.
He's creating a problem for our Aboriginal people to get employment by his publishing things in the rubbish like he's got in his voice.
Is that the only thing he's doing? Surely he's giving blacks a very bad name.
Well, it's making it hard for blacks to walk down the streets unless people look at him as though there goes more people to cause him trouble.
Is he creating racism in Wellington?
Oh yeah, he's creating a lot, heaps. Before we could go to any shop and nobody'd worry, but now he's created a lot. People look at you as though you're guilty before you do anything.
Complaints have gone all the way to the Press Council in Sydney, which issued a strong condemnation of The Voice in April.
This decision of the Press Council, in fact, excommunicates this newspaper from the community of the Australian press, and that's a signal to the readers and people to not place any weight at all on the excesses which are published in this newspaper.
So you're not going to take any notice of what the Press Council says?
The Press Council's a paper tiger. The Press Council's controlled by the Murdochs and the Fairfaxes of this world.
Do you think Wellington is a racist town?
No, not really. No.
Do you think you're cultivating racism by the things you print?
Definitely not. Look, I am out for the scum, against the scum in this town, whether they're white, red, black or brindle.
Ironically, some of BRUNKER's most vocal supporters can be found here at Wellington's Namina Reserve.
I want to have a talk to you about the papers the other day.
And that may be explained by the fact that the reserve and the co-op have been at odds for some time over housing and funding. And BRUNKER has always championed the reserve.
Nearly every paper I read that he's put in so far, everything that he's put in the paper, I think you can go back through his stories. He always says one lot of Aborigines are making it bad for the other lot, for the decent people. I think I've read that in nearly every article he's put in. I think if you go back through his paper, you'll find the same thing.
What he says is right. We live out here. He comes and visits us. If he was a white man that didn't like blacks, he wouldn't walk into a black fella's home and have a cup of tea, and he's had cups of tea at my place many a time.
But even his supporters on the reserve are wary.
Everything I've seen so far is up to standard with him. And if he ever puts anything in that's not right, he will be tipped on his head, as I explained to him before.
Well, that's that. And that's that for this evening. See you tomorrow night at 7:30. Till then, good night.
The 1984 Olympic Games in Los Angeles
can be filled with all kinds of drama. But even the makers of A Country Practice would have a hard time making up the sensational stories that fill the pages of the Wellington Voice, a weekly paper based in Wellington, New South Wales. Its editor, Jim BRUNKER, dubbed himself Fearless Jim and set out on a one-man crusade to expose the crime, the corruption, the social hypocrisies which supposedly lie behind the facade of any country town. That at least was his version. His critics would call BRUNKER a blatant racist and scandalmonger, dedicated to stirring up trouble for the sake of selling a few more papers. His voice, according to many in the town, was the voice of hate. Either way, it meant quite a story behind the story.
Hi, how are you? Any news for me? Gossip, scandal, murder, mayhem, anything at all?
Twice a day, Jim BRUNKER does his news beat looking for titbits. And like any other country town, Wellington is not short on gossip.
I'm from The Voice. Have you got any news for me?
No gossip.
No gossip.
It's a pretty community in the heart of New South Wales, and for over a century has been served by its one worthy, if dull, newspaper, the Wellington Times. Then, 18 months ago, in direct opposition, came The Voice. When you open a country newspaper, you generally know pretty well what to expect. The odd flower show, the occasional report on the last Bowls Club meeting, and a rundown on wool and cattle prices. Well, the Wellington Voice has all of that, and a whole lot more. In its pages, you can read gossip, scandal and startling revelations. Headlines like "Sadistic Monster Stalks Town." That was the story about a man who mistreated a cat in Wellington. Or this, "Dogs Foul Footpath, Shopkeepers Angry." All very amusing, but there is another side to the Wellington Voice, a side that's prompted its critics to call it racist and the Press Council to label it disgusting.
Violet, could you come into the ladies' toilet with me just so I can examine the cubicles, if you don't mind? Thanks.
Jim BRUNKER is a man who will go anywhere for a story. In this case, a handbag stolen in the local ladies' toilet. Nothing that happens in this town escapes his attention.
That should be down about there to prevent anyone putting their hand under.
Now, you know somebody may attack you for having said black hand snatcher's handbag. Why say black hand?
Because it was fact. It was a black hand. If it was a white hand, I'd put white hand reaches under the toilet and snatches a handbag. It's not racism. For God's sake. Next thing, what they'll be doing is, I have a favourite cheese, and they're going to change the name of that. The cheese is called Coon. So what are they going to call it? White people's cheese?
That's John. Like
have you a criminal record?
Yeah, I got a record.
Well, therefore you're a well-known criminal.
You got a record?
Have I? You know a lot of things, don't you? Very smart boy, Douglas.
Why don't they dig up your past? Dig up your past, see what you've been doing.
Well, they can if they want to. I've got nothing to be frightened of.
Every Wednesday, The Voice hits the streets, and it's delivered with style in a borrowed Mercedes. For BRUNKER's baby, nothing but the best will do. Priced at 40 cents, BRUNKER claims The Voice is winning the Wellington circulation war.
Hi, Jim.
Hi, Mary. 150 for you this morning, my love.
Oh, that's good, love. We sold out last week. That's very good.
Terrific. Okay.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much.
Most newspaper offices are organised chaos, but headquarters for The Voice is just a plain shambles. A volunteer secretary practising her typing, and only last week was the phone put on. But despite his working conditions, Jim BRUNKER really is a news hound.
Look, that Mumble store robbery, I understand you know a little bit about it. Oh, yeah? Yeah, there were 2 girls involved in it. Well, bail was refused on them. They're out and about, are they?